Welcome everyone, this is Nurse Doza, and welcome to another session of School Doza. And I'm excited today because today we get to talk about something I'm very passionate about, and it's women's health. And you might say, here's a guy talking about women's health. What does he know about it? Well, I know a lot. Throughout the years, I have made it a point to hear from as many women as possible in regards to their own health and wellness. And I've taken it upon myself to help maybe address some of those issues that they've had all along and maybe get to the root cause of the issue to hopefully prevent them from being on more medications and hopefully preventing even more surgeries down the road. Because I can tell you right now, big medicine and surgeries and even pharma have failed women in many ways. It's something I've talked about for many years, and if you looked at the research and you've looked at the development and all the medical devices, a lot of them have failed women. And we look at this and we kind of push it to the side. Now, I know if you're a woman, you don't push it to the side. This is an issue that you're dealing with on a daily basis. And if you need a voice, you need people to be able to actually speak on your behalf. Well, I'm one of those people. For most women, they don't think about their health until it's too late. And this episode is going to make sure that you put your health first and foremost before anything else. Because when you take control of your health, it has to start at an early age, the earliest possible. 1 in 3 women will have a hysterectomy before the age of 60, which means that women right now are getting sicker than they probably were years ago, and maybe even earlier than imagined. And for most people, when it comes to understanding their hormones, we don't understand them. Most women don't understand their hormones at all. And so if you take anything away from this podcast, you're hopefully going to understand your hormones a lot better. For most people, this is an opportunity for you to learn. And we hope that you take this and go research this and all the references that we provide at home. If you're ready, class is in session. The topic of today is how to delay menopause. And this is a topic that most people are not familiar with at all. Delaying menopause is something that can happen and it can be to your benefit. And I'm going to give you 5 different reasons and tips on how to delay menopause and the benefits of doing it so. Point number 1, why would a woman want to delay menopause in the first place? Well, the later the menopause, the longer you live. Let me say that again. The later the menopause, the longer you live. Now, menopause is a transition that for most people, it begins around 45 to about 55. And that's what I've been told. That's what I was taught in school. And menopause can usually last as anywhere from years to many, many, many years. And I want you to understand that menopause is not just genetic. And for most women, they are under the assumption that it's just genetic. My mom went through menopause at this age, I'm going to go through it at this age too. That may be true for some, but genetics is not the only reason why you will get menopause at an earlier age. Lifestyle is a big contributor to earlier onset menopause. And menopause for most women is not pleasant. So the transition of going through menopause for some women is not pleasant, and most will not enjoy it. So when we talk about delaying something like this, most women say, I want to get it over with. I want to be done with this. But I'm here to tell you right now, the quicker that you lose your ability to have a menstrual cycle, the quicker and shorter your life it will be. Another thing about menopause is that it's not just losing your egg production or your release of eggs, it's also losing your hormone production. During perimenopause, the body's production of estrogen and progesterone, 2 hormones made by the ovaries, decreases. And if you're losing your estrogen and progesterone in menopause, how early does this start for some women? Could it be in their 30s? Could it be in their 40s? If you're on birth control in your 20s and your teens, are you actually suppressing your estrogen and progesterone from an earlier age than imagined? Now think about this. Not only does lifestyle affect your menopause risk and maybe going into menopause at an earlier age, we know lifestyle will too. I have a quote here: smokers and women with chronic illnesses tend to experience menopause at an earlier age. And a lot of times we talk about delaying menopause, and some women will say, why do I want to delay this? I want to get it over with. Well, here we go. Let's talk about what will happen once you get into menopause. Postmenopausal women are more vulnerable to heart disease. Estrogen supports the heart. It's been well established over the years in literature that estrogen supports a healthy heart. And is there a coincidence that heart disease is still the silent killer of women, and it tends to increase when a woman goes into menopause? Think about how protective your hormones are, especially estrogen is, when it comes to your overall function and your health. If a woman loses estrogen production, does that mean they have an increased risk for heart disease? Yes, it does. And so when a woman says, I want to go into menopause at an earlier age, maybe in their 30s or 40s, I think about their risk for heart disease. And it goes up. Estrogen and cholesterol. Estrogen has a very positive effect on lipoprotein profiles, lowering LDL, the bad cholesterol, and raising HDL, quote unquote, the good cholesterol. There's an estimate contribution of 30% of cardiovascular benefit in premenopausal women, which means estrogen protects your cholesterol, it protects your heart, it protects your arteries, it protects your health. And when you go into menopause, you lose this capability to protect your heart. Now, when it comes to estrogen, it's not the only hormone that you will lose. Estrogen plays a huge role in a woman's health. You will lose progesterone, like we talked about. I've also seen in menopause, women have their adrenal function decrease. And if you think about estrogen and progesterone lowering, you have to imagine testosterone for women is also lowering. Yes, women do make testosterone, but it will also decrease. All your hormones will decrease over time when it comes to menopause. So you imagine you talk to a female who's going through that transition, and let's say I worded it. It can be 7 to 14 years if you want to be, a little more exact, but 7 to 14 years in the making of a woman going through menopause, this transition of losing estrogen production, progesterone production, losing testosterone production, so their muscle mass is decreasing. They're losing adrenal production, which means they cannot respond to stress with cortisol and dopamine production. How does this woman feel? And if she's in her 30s or 40s, she cannot feel good. If she's in her 50s, she can't feel good. And so when I posed the question, right, the theory of why would we want to delay menopause, it's because a woman doesn't feel good in menopause, and there's many reasons why. And we want to make sure that we support the overall health and well-being of every individual. So when it comes to a female, we have to look at the science behind why we should support hormones at a later part of life. Well, we know that there's benefits to supporting hormones. Yes, you feel like a woman. Estrogen helps support, your overall. I mean, it promotes breast tissue, healthy breast tissue, healthy vagina. It promotes the uterus, healthy ovaries. Like all of this is known. But when you talk about estrogen promoting heart health, and we lose that capability, now you're seeing the bigger picture, and you're seeing why women are not feeling that good for a reason. They're getting sicker when they go into menopause, and it's not necessarily a disease. It's just saying estrogen affects the entire body because we don't understand the powerful effects that estrogen does for the body. Estrogen does much more than provide you the ability to be fertile. And for most women do not know that there's 3 different types of estrogens that you mainly make. There's really 7 overall, but 3 different types of estrogens you will make throughout the course of a lifetime. And just to get into it real quickly, we're going to label these E1, E2, E3. Okay, now E1 is estrone. It is the primary hormone you make during menopause, and that is the hormone that most women will feel the effects from when they transition over into menopause. It is not a very healthy estrogen, and it's not the kind of estrogen that makes you feel like a vibrant 20-year-old. You only make this estrogen when you're in menopause, or you're in inflammation. And we'll get to that in a second. E2 is estradiol. It is the primary hormone that the female will make in the reproductive years. and it makes you feel like a female. In fact, when you do hormone replacement therapy, they give you bioidentical, hopefully, estradiol cream or sublingual, and they're trying to give you E2, because when you talk about estrogen replacement therapy, I don't want to give you more E1, the same kind of estrogen you find in menopause. I don't want to do that and make you feel worse. I want to give you more E2, the kind that you had when you were 20 years old and made you feel great. Now, E3 is estradiol and is the hormone you make when you're pregnant. And you only make it when you're pregnant. So think about that. You make different estrogens throughout the course of a lifetime, when you're pregnant, when you're not pregnant, and when you go into menopause, and they're there for a reason. So when I talk about support your estrogen throughout your lifetime and understand which ones you're making throughout the lifetime. Another reason to delay menopause is to prevent diabetes. Estrogen regulates your insulin. And I say estrogen, I say estradiol. Estrogen regulates your insulin. So the second a woman goes into a premenopausal state of mind, or I shouldn't say state of mind, a state of for the body, when they go into a premenopausal state, they will have this ability to lose insulin regulation, and all of a sudden it puts them at higher risk for developing things like insulin resistance. And I quote, menopause is a potential risk factor for developing insulin resistance, independent of age, likely due to the reduction of circulating estrogens. This is incredible, because now we know that estrogen helps support the heart. Now we know estrogen also helps support your insulin. And if I think about all the problems that we have in healthcare in this country, 1 in 3 people walk around pre-diabetic, 1 in 3 adults walk around with heart disease risk. And I think about estrogen in women being lost over the prime years of their, midlife. And now they have their heart disease risk go up and they have their diabetes risk go up. And women say, I want to go into menopause at an earlier age. I say, you want to go and become a diabetic at an earlier age, or put your risk at becoming one higher? Or you want to increase your risk for heart disease? No. And if you say this is a backwards way to think about it, let's look at the connection between estrogen and insulin a little bit more. Let's talk about PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is one of the most commonly diagnosed disorders in women. And in fact, actually, let me just say this right here, and I quote, polycystic ovarian syndrome is currently recognized as the most common endocrine disorder in women of reproductive age. Which means that if you look to the left and right of you, most likely one of your female friends will be dealing with PCOS. And PCOS, I'm telling you right now, is insulin resistance of the ovaries. It's like a type 4 diabetes. And most women who are insulin resistant, it's not that they might become a diabetic, it might be that they have PCOS at an earlier age. And you imagine PCOS, if it's a metabolic issue, this woman probably is in a low-grade inflammatory state. That's what happens with insulin resistance. That's what can happen with PCOS. But with PCOS, it's involving, the sex hormones, because if you're insulin resistant of the ovaries, my question is, do you make healthy estrogen? And estrogen can come from the ovaries, but most women don't know that ovaries are not the only place that women make estrogen. In fact, actually, the liver makes estrogen, the adrenal glands make estrogen, and your fat cells make estrogen. But keep in mind, your ovaries are one of the few places that makes very healthy estrogen. All those other places I mentioned, like the adrenals and the fat cells, they make estrone, the unhealthy menopausal hormone that you will find when you finally stop your period. So let's go back to why a woman wants to delay menopause. Well, you lower your risk for diabetes, you lower your risk for PCOS, you lower your risk for heart disease. That's why I tell women I think we should focus on our hormones at a very early age, because we want to delay menopause. I talk to women who have healthy cycles in their 50s with healthy periods that don't clot, that aren't painful, that aren't heavy. And I tell them, and I look at their labs, I look at their FSH, I look at their LH, I look at their estradiol, I look at their progesterone, I look at their testosterone. And guess what? What they're telling me and looking at their labs, they're still fertile. I've met several women personally in their 50s that are fertile and could still possibly have a child. And most women are almost appalled to hear me talk about this because it's unheard of. They just expect that menopause is this horrible thing that's going to happen and they're going to transition through it horribly. And then who knows what's going to happen on the other side. I've had women have menopause and then have a hysterectomy afterwards because they had fibroids afterwards. PCOS, endometriosis, all these things are issues at an earlier age, just like the birth control. You want to talk about IUDs. Okay, this is where I'm getting on my soapbox now. The reason why healthcare has failed women is because we give women all these therapies, and I quote unquote therapies, and disregard what could possibly happen down the road. If you have a hysterectomy, a woman loses their uterus and their ovaries, and yes, they can't have a baby, but they still need hormones. That organ was designed to be in that person's body. They won't function better because the ovaries and the uterus are out. No, they could function worse. Talk to a woman with a thyroidectomy. Are they still having thyroid issues? Yes, they still have to be put on thyroid meds. Talk to a woman who's been a diabetic and insulin's still not even fixing the problem. So you imagine now, let's just go through the last 20, 30 years of what a possible female possibly could have gone through with the healthcare industry. And I shouldn't say healthcare, the medical industry. A hysterectomy, birth control, an IUD. If you were one of those women that had one of those mesh devices implanted in you, you're probably involved in a class action lawsuit against the pharmaceutical companies and the medical companies that developed it. Birth control can put you at higher risk for gallstones. How many women do you know have had gallbladders removed? And I can tell you right now, if you were on oral estrogen for 10 years, 5 years, you probably put yourself at risk for that. I'm not saying you did it personally, but maybe it was one of your doctors or someone that handed you the birth control. And let's talk about birth control for a second. Birth control was designed to stop your natural cycle's ability to make you fertile enough to be pregnant. And the birth control worked so well that it shut down all your estrogens and it shut down your fertility. That's what exactly it was designed to do. And for some women, they've been on birth control for 5, 10, 15 years. 10 years on birth control. Birth control destroys your liver and it gets converted into estrogen, but it gets converted into inflammatory estrogen, estrone. Yes, birth control gets converted into estrogen still. It doesn't suppress all the estrogens. It gets converted into estrone, that inflammatory menopausal hormone. So for 10 years, this female was basically taking birth control, causing increased estrone production throughout the body, and causing increased risk of gallstones, polluting the liver, possibly making themselves insulin resistant, and increasing the risk for heart disease. And it all started with birth control, which may or may not have been given for suppressing the fertility to begin with. A lot of times women are put on birth control because they had acne. Acne. Why in the world would I give you a medication that suppresses your estrogen for something like acne? It's because inflammatory estrogen gives you bad skin. Because talk to a healthy female who has healthy estrogen, they have healthy skin. And if you have unhealthy estrogen at an earlier age due to lifestyle and poor genetics, guess what? You put yourself in a risk for getting a very heavy detox system that doesn't work, stuffing it with full of birth control pills that are not good for the body at all. But it was counterintuitive, right? And we look at women getting birth control handed to them out like candy, IUDs stuck in them without disregard for what could happen to their ovaries later down the road. The mesh things almost killed fallopian tubes and ovaries for years. And yet we think it's okay for a female to take their daughter to the doctor at age 12 and say, put them on birth control, something that will destroy my daughter's fertility for years, and think it's okay. If this was a son, they would not go into the doctor's office and walk out with the parents saying it was okay that the doctor recommended we suppress his testosterone. It just wouldn't happen. But how do we allow this to happen every single day? It's going on right now as we speak. A female is starting birth control today. And what is it going to do for her estrogen down the road? Does it put her into an earlier stage of menopause? I believe so. So it brings me to the third point. What do you do about delay in menopause? Well, here's a tip. Support your healthy estrogen right now. Estradiol is the healthy estrogen that you want to focus on. And there's plenty of ways to do it. If you think about your lifestyle, what are you eating? What are you consuming? Who are you around? What are you thinking on a daily basis? What are you breathing in that's causing inflammation in your body? If you eat a lot of processed food, it damages your liver. Your liver helps regulate estrogen production. We talked about this in the liver episode. The liver regulates all your hormones, but it directly regulates estrogen. And if you have a fatty liver, which 1 in 4 US adults do, then you have the ability to make inflammatory estrogen. And if you take birth control, oral birth control on top of that, then you're going to make inflammatory estrogen. If you are inflamed, you can make inflammatory estrogen because your fat cells make inflammatory estrogen. Okay? If you overstimulate your body due to stress, your adrenals make inflammatory estrogen. You want to do things to your body that makes healthy estrogen, estradiol. Healthy diet, real food, plant-based ingredients, resveratrol, black cohosh, DIM, milk thistle, NAC, N-acetylcysteine, turmeric. All these things help support estradiol. The other thing you have to look at too is you have to regulate your insulin, right? So we talked about that. I love resveratrol for this reason. Alpha lipoic acid, berberine, chromium. There's all kinds of ways to help support your insulin. Your estradiol, and it could be supporting your insulin. We went back to the heart disease thing, right? Well, you want to help support your heart. Well, why don't we support your estrogen right now? Because when you're put on blood pressure pills and statins and they're worried about your heart and your blood pressure down the road, there's reports that say giving estrogen replacement therapy has helped support the heart and lowered insulin. And you're like, wow, shouldn't we just give this at an earlier age? Well, we do. But if we were put on birth control and we're given IUDs and we have a very, very horrible lifestyle and we drink alcohol on top of that, we kill our liver. We basically kill the ability to regulate our insulin and our estrogen, and we put women into an earlier state of menopause risk. And this is lifestyle. This is not genetics. This is lifestyle. This was all self-inflicted. And I'm not coming down on you. This is the passion and the upset. This is basically the frustration I have. In a lot of ways, I saw my mom go through this. The best thing my mom went through was that she had natural kids at an earlier age. And the best thing you can do for a healthy cycle and to delay menopause is to have kids. But nowadays we have a lot of women who aren't having kids, or they have infertility issues and they can't have kids. Think about how many females you know that have gone through IVF. Those shots are very painful. I've seen bruises on their stomachs. They don't like it. And a lot of times it doesn't work right away. And it's very expensive. But imagine that doctor would have talked to them in their teens and said, let's get you started on healthy estrogen production now. Let's do what we can to support it. What does that doctor look like? What does that practitioner look like? That's this podcast here. You're going to pass this podcast along to a friend, maybe share it with your daughter, your niece, and all of a sudden it changes your mind because it's not too late. I don't care how old you are. You can support your hormones right now. You're going to make hormones for your rest of your life. Are you going to make inflammatory hormones? You're going to make healthier hormones. And if you have the ability to make any hormones at all, then support the little bit of hormones you do make, or consider hormone replacement therapy if it's right for you. That's, once again, supporting your healthy estrogen right now. And by the way, supporting your estrogen will also support the idea of lessening your breast cancer risk. I know a lot of people say it's genetic. I have tons of studies if you'd like to look at how inflammatory estrogen is directly linked to breast cancer risk. Estrone sulfate levels are associated with breast cancer risk in postmenopausal women. That was a quote. And a lot of times that inflammatory estrogen comes directly from fat cells. So this brings me to my point number 4. Another way to delay menopause is to lose weight. And for some people, if you want to lose weight, this is for you. If this isn't for you, that's fine. But think about this. quote unquote, menopause is also associated with obesity. This association is complicated because body fat deposition increases during the menopausal transition and postmenopausal period. Adipose tissue is a major source of estrogenic and androgenic steroids, and the changes in sex hormone concentrations that occur after the menopausal transition can also influence the regulation of body fat deposition. All that fancy terminology means that when your fat cells get bigger, you make inflammatory estrogen, which will suppress your ability to make healthy estrogen. If you're going through that transition of menopause, you're accelerating the button if your fat cells get inflamed. And we talked about weight loss, we've talked about liver. Keep in mind your fat cells are a storage unit, and they've stored up all the diet sodas and all the alcohol and all, possibly even some of the birth control throughout the years. And it made your fat cells make more inflammatory estrone, which possibly could have put you at higher risk for getting menopause at an earlier age. And so, like I said, when it comes to losing weight, there's a metabolic issue that's involved. If you lose weight, where do you lose weight? You lose it around your belly and your chest, right? Is it the breast tissue that's inflamed that's causing the increased production of estrone that possibly could be targeting your breast tissue and turning on it and making it inflamed too? Is that a direct link of how breast cancer can come about? Yes, I believe that's one way that breast cancer can come about. It's not just the BRCA thing. There's other ways that a woman can make estrogen that causes breast cancer. It comes from inflamed fat cells. Our fat cells make hormones. They make estrone, they make leptin, they make adiponectin if it's healthy. They also make inflammatory responses like cytokines, interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor. When you have inflamed fat cells, they're not only just pumping out inflamed estrogen, they're pumping out inflamed interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor that's found in cancers, that's found in serious chronic illness. So when a woman says they want to go into menopause at an earlier age, I hope they're not overweight. Because if they're overweight, they're causing inflammation throughout the body that's accelerating the process of going into menopause at an earlier age. So when I talk about losing weight, I'm not saying, yes, it's to fit in your pants and make you feel good. I'm saying it's to basically delay menopause. And you say, well, why is this so important? I say, well, it's because I hear women every day come to me talking about how they don't feel good and how they're inflamed and their hormones are off and they have to be put on pellets that are full of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And that may be fixing the whole problem. Hormone replacement therapy is not going to solve the problem. Maybe estrogen replacement therapy is what you need. Progesterone helps you with your sleep. But if your testosterone's low, are you going to replace that too? A woman needs estrogen. She doesn't just need testosterone. She needs estrogen. What about the adrenals? What about the insulin? We haven't even talked about the thyroid in a while. You know, melatonin's a hormone too. You know, dopamine's a hormone. Leptin, adiponectin. All of these things are talking to one another. And in menopause, all these hormones are basically either shutting down or they're pissed off. We're fortunate enough to make different estrogens throughout the course of a lifetime. But once you're out of one, you're out of it. Once you shut down your adrenal production, that's it. Once you're out of testosterone, that's it. I'm doing everything I can in my power to not have to take testosterone therapy. I'm 41 right now. My testosterone is around 800 for my total testosterone. I'm watching it in real time and making sure it's headed in the right direction. Women come in here, we order their labs, we look at their FSH, their LH. Those are the precursor hormones to your estrogen and progesterone and your testosterone production. You can see them fluctuate in their 30s and 40s in premenopause. So when they say, yeah, there's no markers or blood work for premenopause, there is. You just have to order the right ones and deal with the person who knows what they're doing. But the FSH and LH are the precursors you order. You order that with the estradiol. You order that with the progesterone. You order that with the DHAS. You order that with the testosterone. Okay? You order that with your thyroid. Your TSH won't even matter at this point because all those other things are overriding what's going on with the thyroid. You can order a TPO if you want to. And if you're looking at all of those in real time, you can also look at estrone. I order estrone all the time. I've ordered it for years. I can measure estrone and estradiol in a woman's cycle, and I can tell you right now what we've seen is estradiol, E2, the good estrogen, has to be higher at day 14 to day 21 during a woman's cycle in order for that woman to have a vibrant, healthy body, let alone be fertile. If you have healthy hormones, you're healthy. You have unhealthy hormones, you're not healthy. So when a woman comes in and says they want to check out how healthy they are, they want to check out their hormones, I say, I want to check your blood work day 14 to 21. More likely day 14, mid-cycle. Why? Because at that point, you're in the luteal phase, the LH phase, day 14. That is your most fertile day you will have during your cycle, which means if I check all your hormones, they should all be at the highest possible range. And when you check at day 14 and you see that they're not, you match it with the FSH and the LH, and you can see in real time if a woman is headed towards menopause. It makes things difficult if they're still on birth control because it suppresses all of their estrogen except one, estrone. If you're on birth control in your 30s, are you hiding the fact that you're heading to menopause? Yeah, because as soon as you get off the birth control, you're like, where'd my period go? This is a lot, I know. And I'm passionate about this. It's probably the most passionate I've been on the podcast so far. I saw my mom's health suffer because most of the doctors took everything out of her. They took her gallbladder out of her. They took her ovaries. They took her uterus. They wanted to take part out of her stomach out. She had digestive issues her whole life. I love my mom. She's overweight. Breast cancer survivor. She's still battling diabetes. And of course, heart disease. Everything that I just talked about right now is describing her. And she is your beautiful, typical Hispanic woman who goes to the doctor and listens to the doctor and says and everything and listens to everything the doctor says. And just did everything she was told to do for the last 30 years of her life. And what did it lead her to? She's about to turn 70. And she told me the other day this is the best she's ever felt. The reason I'm so passionate about women's health is because of my mom. If we can prevent breast cancer, heart disease, serious, horrible issues down the road, then this is why we're talking about what we're talking about today. I'm passionate about women's health because I don't want another woman to suffer through some of the same things that my mom had to go through. So every day we get up, we talk about why we should support our liver, because throughout the whole process, every time I talked to my mom and all the oncology appointments I went to, they never talked about supporting the liver. When I asked the oncologist which estrogen blocker they were going to put her on and which estrogen they were going to block, they couldn't give me an answer. They put my mom on an estrogen blocker 5 years after radiation treatment was done, but she was still a woman. She's not allowed to have estrogen replacement therapy for the rest of her life, according to her doctors. But yet she's a vibrant, healthy 70-year-old lady. And yet you don't think she could benefit from some healthy hormones? Like I said, she said this is the best she's ever felt. All the things that we talked about are what I talk to her about every day and talked about every week. She probably doesn't like me hearing about it or saying it all the time to her nowadays, but I think she gets the picture now. Because I told her, I said, breast cancer is not coming back. We're going to do everything we can to not have it come back. So, like I said, these things here, it might not work for everyone, but a lot of it works for a lot of people. Take something you can use on a daily basis and you can execute with it. What would it look like if you could do that? What could you take from this podcast that you could start working with today? There's 3 things in closing that you could do right now. 1, to delay menopause, you could regulate your insulin. Number 2, to delay menopause, you could support your healthy estrogen now. Number 3, to delay menopause, you could change bad lifestyle habits. Regulate your insulin, support your healthy estrogen now, change bad lifestyle habits. If you want to try a supplement, I love Liver Love and Mitochondriac. Pair it together. You support your liver, you support your insulin, you support detoxification, you support hormones. Liver Love, Mitochondriac, take it together. I take it daily, every time in the morning, because I want healthy hormones too, right? And a healthy liver. Sign up for our newsletter. Find me on TikTok at Nurse Doza. If you're in Austin, please come by and check out the MSW Lounge. It's a very wonderful place. Hopefully I can give you a hug and just pass this podcast along to someone else you think would want to hear it. Class has ended. Keep studying at home. Thanks for listening.